Isang mabayayang araw sa inyong lahat. Kamusta na ang inyong matyagang pagsasaliksik ng salita ng Diyos, ang Biblia? Napanood at napakinggan natin sa nakaraang parsang tinalakay ni Brother J ang tungkol sa Royal Kingdom na kung bakit ang United Kingdom ni Haring David ay nahati sa dalawa. Ganyan nga ang naging kahidatnan sa kasalanang nagawa ni Haring David at ang anak niyang si Haring Solomon. This started during the time of the reign of King Solomon's son named Rehoboam. Alamin natin sa susunod na biblical session na ito kung ano ang mangyayari sa mga Israelita sa kanilang naging dalawang kaharian, ang Northern Kingdom, ang Israel, at ang Southern Kingdom, ang Judah. Sa ikawalong biblical period, ang ating paksa ay ang exile o ang pagpapatapon. Ang facilitator ay inyong abang lingkod. Ako si Maria Elena Rosillo. By the way, allow me to thank Sister Baby Saban who made this engaging PowerPoint presentation. Ganito nga ang mahabang kasaysayan ng mga Israelita nang sila ay pamunuan ng mga hukom at ng mga hari. However, they continued to commit sin, as in breaking their covenant with God. Balikan natin ang aklat ng Exodus chapter 19. Ang kwento ng dinala ni Moses ang mga Israelita sa bundok ng Sinai, na kung tawagin din ay ang bundok ng Horeb. Doon sila ay sumamba sa Diyos at nagkaroon ng pagtitipan. Ibig sabihin, ang mga Israelita ang naging bayan ng Diyos at si Yahweh naman ang kanilang tanging Diyos. Ganyan ang kanilang kasunduan. Gagabayan at poprotektahan sila ni Yahweh habang sila naman ay kailangang susunod sa mga utos ni Yahweh. Paulit-ulit na pinadalhan ng Diyos ang mga Israelita ng mga propeta na nagpapaalala sa kanilang tipan o kasunduan. Subalit, hindi nila ito pinakinggan. Sa halip, nagmatigas pa sila, katulad ng kanilang mga ninuno na hindi nagtiwala kay Yahweh. The kings and the people continued to fall into idol worship and various types of apostasy. Sumamba sila sa ibang Diyos at ginaya pa ang mga kaugalian ng mga bansang itinaboy ni Yahweh. The chosen people abused their privileges, particularly the rich and powerful. They committed the corruption of justice and they compromised their faith. They are violating clearly their covenants with God. Kaya, itinakwil sila ni Yahweh. Pinabayaan silang magdanas ng hirap sa malulupit na kaaway hanggang sila'y lubusang malupig. God's anger befell on Israel and Judah. Nauna ang Israel, the northern kingdom, fell. Mula sa Assyria, sinalakay at sinakop ni Haring Tiglat-Pileser ang maraming lupain ng Israel at binihag pa ang lahat na naninirahan doon. Samaria was captured by Sargon II in 722 before Christ. Assyria wanted to destroy the cultural, political, religious identity of the people in order to prevent future uprisings. What are the tactics of the Assyrians? They exiled some Israelites and intermarried the others. Scholars calculated that these captives constituted 1/10 to 1/20th of the population, which was taken mostly from the influential classes. This was in order to discourage rebellion among those who remained. Those who remained intermarried and were absorbed into the 5 pagan nations. They were imported into Samaria. They became known as the Samaritans. The Israelites were brought captives to Assyria, the modern-day northern Iraq. They were absorbed into the Assyrian culture. Thus, they lost their identity and religion. They were referred to as the 10 lost tribes of Israel. They never returned from exile.
Sa aklat ni Tobit, isa sa mga aklat ng Deuterocanonico, ay mayroong kwento ng 2 Israelitang pamilya na napatapon sa Assyria. Ang pamilya ni Tobit na nanirahan sa Nineveh at ang pamilya ni Sarah na nanirahan sa Ekbatana sa Persia. Sila ay mga ordinaryong pamilya na nagbigay ng mabuting halimbawa kung paano mamumuhay sa malayong lupain. Kahit sila ay mga karaniwang tao lamang, sila ay pinapansin ng Diyos. Patuloy pa rin si Tobit at Sarah sa makadiyos na asal ng mga Israelita, ang maging matuwid at tapat sa kanilang pananampalataya kay Yahweh. Kaya nagpadala si Yahweh ng anghel, si Arkanghel Raphael, upang sila ay tulungan.
Later, in 587 before Christ, the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar captured the southern kingdom, which is Judah, destroying the city wall and the temple in Jerusalem, taking captive many thousands of people into exile, Babylon, the modern-day southern Iraq. Possibly 50,000 Judeans, including women and children, were transported into 3 deportations by Nebuchadnezzar. A remnant of the poor people was caused to serve as farmers and vine dressers. 13, Jerusalem was left in ruins. Nebuchadnezzar also took out the skilled, the young, and the smart, including the prophet Daniel, and brought them to Babylon as servants.
Daniel's story exemplifies God's faithfulness to Judah during their time of trial. He was sent by God to the exiles in Babylon to provide hope and encouragement to God's people. Daniel and his young Jewish friends refused the king's food and wine to show their faithfulness to the Jewish food law. Ang pagpapatapon ng mga Israelita sa Babylonia was a reverse to Exodus, na kung saan sila ay malaya from Egyptian slavery. Dahil dito sa exile, sila ay mga bihag at napatapon sa foreign land. In Babylon, they were allowed to have their own homes, to visit one another freely, and to engage in business. Soon, many acquired economic security and social stability. For the first time, they were described as the Jews. There, they were comforted in exile by the prophet Ezekiel, who had a vision of dry bones coming to life. Desperately, the Israelites lost their land. They were reduced as a people when they were divided into 2 kingdoms. Their beloved temple was destroyed, and they lost their independence. What they sow,
is what they reap. Nang nawala na ang lahat, nakapag-isip-isip sila, sila ba kaya ay nakalimutan na ni Yahweh? The Babylonian exile and captivity had afforded the Jews with deeper reflections and learnings. They realized the truth of the warnings of the prophets. So, they turned back to the word of God. In order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, the Jewish people were allowed to return to Judah after 70 years of exile. Let us now continue with the 9th biblical period, the return, the period of restoration. The Lord inspired King Cyrus of Persia. Persia is the modern-day Iran. King Cyrus issued a decree allowing the Jews to return to Judah and to begin rebuilding the city and the temple. The vision of the prophet Ezekiel about God's glory was then fulfilled. The dry bones that came back to life and the life-giving river that flows out from God's new temple. Ang unang returnist na pinamumuan ni Zerubbabel at ni Jeshua ay nakabalik na sa Jerusalem. They supervised in laying the foundation of the temple despite the oppositions by some Samaritans. However, another Persian, King Darius, helped them. Thus, the temple area was completed. They were also influenced by the prophets Haggai and Zechariah. The second group of returnees were under the direction of Ezra, a scribe from the tribe of Levi, who led to the revival among the Jewish people and the rebuilding of the temple. Ezra insisted fidelity to the Torah as Judaism's authentic way of life. Ang Torah ay ang unang 5 aklat ng lumang tipan, na kung tawagin ay the Book of Laws. Ezra's efforts earned him the title, the Father of Judaism. His uncompromising stand on mixed marriages, a lesson learned from Solomon's sins, effectively expelled many returnees from this new nation to keep themselves pure in the midst of foreign people. Nehemiah headed the third wave of returnees. Isa siyang cupbearer or royal bartender of the Persian king Artaxerxes. Tinitikman muna niya ang alak. This was to ensure that it was not poisoned. Thus, Nehemiah earned the king's complete confidence and made him a very important person in the eyes of people. What was remarkable about Nehemiah was that in spite of his position of authority, he did not forget to look back to where he came from. As one of our Filipino proverbs says, ang taong hindi marunong tumanaw ng pinanggalingan ay hindi makararating sa paroroonan. Nehemiah could have stayed where he was and enjoyed the comforts of the palace, but he chose to go back to his homeland to help rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. In his return, Nehemiah was not empty-handed, for he was entrusted with the remaining treasures which the Babylonians ransacked from Jerusalem. He faced great opposition to the task
that God gave him. However, with God's help, he succeeded. Everyone did his work with one hand and held a weapon at his right hand. The people worked with a strong will. Sana ganyan tayo mga Pilipino. Matatag ang determinasyon para tunay na umunlad ang ating bansa. Nehemiah was able to reconstruct the temple and took him only 52 days to build the city walls of Jerusalem. The Temple of Jerusalem played an important role in religious, social, and economic lives of the Israelites. For this is the symbol of the presence of God among His people, particularly the Ark of the Covenant. It was a dwelling place for God. The second temple was rebuilt. Ngunit ito ang tanong, mananatili kaya ang bagong tayong banal na templo sa pangangalaga ng mga Hudyo na galing sa exile? During this time, the Persian Empire's foothold was weakening in its territories. Alexander the Great, king of the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedonia, was coming to conquer Persia. Ang susunod na tatalakayin ay isang pangyayari sa loob ng 100 taon. Ang pag-aalsa ng mga Maccabean, nakilala sa tawag na the Maccabean Revolt. Ito ay naganap noong intertestamental period. Ito ay ang panahon sa gitna ng luma at bagong tipan. Itong intertestamental period ay wala sa Biblia ng ibang relihiyon. But this is a significant period between the New and the Old Testaments. Kaya't walang bibitaw habang sinusubaybayan natin ang mga susunod na kabanata. Maraming salamat sa Panginoon sa kanyang walang patid na pagbibigay ng inspirasyon sa atin upang lalo pa nating pagbutihan ang pagtangkilik ng The Bible, an overview, a story. Truly, God is the Lord of salvation history.